Coming to you from 4,200 feet in the hills of Oregon, it's the voice of Chi-Town, the reddest beard in the high desert, your host of the MOA broadcast, Sam Wilson. All right, folks, today we're going to be doing something different. If you follow the MOA broadcast, the Make It Out Alive broadcast on a regular basis, this is typically a radio show that I do. It goes out on every Saturday morning and Sunday evening on the local radio. And after Saturday morning, it gets uploaded and becomes a podcast available on Spotify and Apple and all the top podcast services. And it's a show based around preparedness and survival. And we also cover a lot of current events and look at why are things happening, what could we do to protect ourselves or do better in a situation in maybe case of an emergency. What we don't do is get political, try and force our opinions on you, and we like to do what the news used to do years ago, which is just give you the information and you draw your own conclusions. Now, that's the MOA broadcast. This is the true crime series of the MOA broadcast, where we're going to delve into true crimes, murder mysteries, and so forth. I asked for feedback on the MOA broadcast, and the number one thing that came back multiple times was folks wanted true crime stuff. That happens to be an interest of mine as well, so here we are. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit, when we're covering crimes and so forth, some things may get a little graphic, but we're going to try and keep this very family-friendly. We don't do curse words and so forth, just, as far as reporting what the newspapers and other events or other sources would say. That being said, when we're talking about murders and other things, you have to decide what's appropriate for you and your family. If you have any questions, concerns, or feedback, or things you would like to see covered, send us an email at info@gearconvoy.com. We send out every week, we send out a free survival kit to the best suggestion or feedback or email we get. Just a little simple miniature survival kit for folks to show our appreciation for giving us some feedback. Now, I have done a lot of audio work. I do audio work regularly. You're going to hear me. We're going to try and keep this very natural. I don't like the overproduced feel when doing like audio books where you go in and edit out every single little breath and pop and click. We're going to keep this very informal, just like the MOA broadcast. I'm recording in the sound booth instead of out in the shop where we do the regular broadcast. So it should be a little better quality, but you're going to hear me take a drink of water or my beverage or whatever along the way. I'm not going to edit all that out. We're going to keep this nice and informal. I like the connection that it forms between the narrator and the listener better personally. I don't like it when it sounds too perfect, so we're going to keep this nice and simple. That being said, we're going to jump right into it. The theme beginning in this episode and probably running through several is we're going to do mob murders. Everybody likes the mafia and the crazy, insane people that are involved. So we're going to jump right in. And again, if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, hit us up at info@gearconvoy.com. And you can go to the website at gearconvoy.com as well and find the MOA broadcast. There's all kinds of info, Patreon page, videos, and so forth. All right, folks, let me get a sip and we're going to jump right in. We're going to run this without a break. So it's going to be, the first one maybe about 40, 45 minutes or so at the most. In the future, we're going to try and keep it to about 30, 35 minutes with no break in the middle. And that way folks like to listen to this on their lunch hour or their drive home or whatever their little time is when they listen to podcasts. They don't have to worry about stopping and starting two different episodes or a break or whatever else. All right. The subject of today's podcast, the true crime version of the MOA broadcast, is Thomas Two Gun Tommy DeSimone. You may know him from the movie Goodfellas. He was portrayed by Joe Pesci as Tommy DeVito. This was based on a real-life character. Now, I'm going to tell you, having done a lot of research for this episode and over the years, you get all kinds of different sources of information and versions of a story. I tried to include as much information as possible while keeping this to a reasonable length. But you're going to hear if you go look this up, you're going to get different versions and opinions of everything. So that being said, we're going to get to it. He was born May 24, 1950 in Cambridge, Middlesex, Massachusetts, United States. His immediate family included a mother, father, Dr. Joseph Paul DeSimone. He was the husband of Angelica DeSimone, brother of Anthony DeSimone and Robert DeSimone, and sisters included Dolores DeSimone and Phyllis DeSimone. Some people pronounce it DeSimone. We're not going to get into that. The most common pronunciation I heard was DeSimone. Now, I usually do a very informal, extemporaneous delivery for these. I'm going to do a manuscript because if I don't keep this dialed in, this is going to go on for 3 hours. So I'll interject a few comments here and there. We're going to try and keep it a manuscript so we stay on point. That being said, let's get to it. Thomas James DeSimone was an Italian-American mobster associated with New York City's Lucchese crime family, who's alleged to have participated in both the Air France robbery and the Lufthansa heist. He also committed numerous murders, including killing William Benvenna in 1970. DeSimone went missing and was presumably murdered in 1979. DeSimone's career in the Lucchese family is explored in the book Wise Guy by Nicholas Pileggi and inspired the character of Tommy DeVito, portrayed by Joe Pesci, one of the main characters of the 1990 film Goodfellas. Thomas had a sister, Dolores, and 2 brothers who were both Gambino crime family associates, Robert and Anthony DeSimone. Anthony was murdered by mobster Thomas Agro in 1979. Thomas was the brother-in-law of mobster Joseph the Barber Spione, who was slain for refusing to help kill DeSimone in the late 70s. Thomas had a 4th sibling, sister Phyllis, who was Jimmy Burke's mistress from the time she turned 16. Pay attention to that name, Jimmy or James Burke. That's going to come up quite frequently. Thomas' father owned and lost a printing shop due to a compulsive gambling addiction. Both DeSimone's grandfather, Rosario DeSimone, and uncle, Frank DeSimone, were bosses of the Los Angeles crime family. DeSimone's paternal grandfather, Rosario DeSimone, became the boss of Los Angeles crime family after Vito DiGiorgio was killed in Chicago in 1922. DeSimone's paternal uncle, Frank DeSimone, was a criminal attorney turned mobster, Uncle Frank as he was known, and replaced Jack Dragna in 1956 after his death, becoming the second DeSimone family member to become the Los Angeles crime family boss. So this whole DeSimone family is steeped in mafia ties. Everybody, it seems, is involved in the mob in one way or another. Let's get to his criminal career. DeSimone was introduced to the Vario crew in 1965. Henry Hill said in Wise Guy, Jimmy Burke, came by the cab stand one day with a skinny kid who was wearing a Wise Guy suit and a pencil mustache. It was Tommy DeSimone. He was one of those kids who looked younger than he was just because he was trying to look older. Jimmy had been a friend of Tommy's family for years and wanted me to watch out for Tommy and to teach him the cigarette business and to help him make a few bucks. DeSimone worked under Mafia capo Paul Vario with Jimmy Burke, Henry Hill, and more. He was involved in truck hijackings, dealing and fencing of stolen property, extortion, fraud, and murder. DeSimone was infamous for his violent temper, and standing at 6 foot 2 inches tall and weighing 225 pounds and being powerfully built, he was not to be taken lightly. His sister was quoted saying, Tommy's teenage years revolved around boxing, lifting weights, smoking cigarettes, and beating a punching bag he kept in a spare room. He had a short fuse and an animalistic appetite. He would drink almost a gallon of whole milk a day. His only other childhood hobby was collecting different kinds of pocket knives he kept in an old cigar box under his bed. His bad temper and aggression were often on display. According to Hill, while playing pinochle with Joseph Iannuzzi and Agro, he would throw darts at the other players when he started losing. Henry Hill's ex-wife, Karen, said in Nicholas Pileggi's book Wise Guy, Tommy DeSimone always drove around in a brand-new car and wore expensive clothes, and he and Angela lived in a 2-room tenement slum, while Hill described DeSimone and Burke by saying, It didn't take anything for these guys to kill you. They liked it. They would sit around drinking booze and talk about their favorite hits. They enjoyed talking about them. An ex-police detective named Frank Santorsola said it gave him enjoyment to break somebody's wrist, murder somebody, beat somebody with a bat. Hill later described DeSimone as a pure psychopath, and Tommy was an expletive loose horse, an expletive homicidal maniac, and was always strung out on coke constantly. Hill suggested that DeSimone may have had something to prove because his older brother Anthony had become an informant and was allegedly murdered by the Gambino crime family for that. During the 60s, DeSimone and fellow associates Henry Hill, Jeff Zins, and Stanley Diamond would go on regular hijackings. While hijacking, DeSimone would always carry his gun in a brown paper bag. Walking down the street, he looked like he was bringing you a sandwich instead of a .38, Hill said. The Air France robbery. During the 1960s, Air France was the carrier of American currency that had been exchanged in Southeast Asia. The airline had contracted to return the money to the U.S. for depositing with American banks. The money was usually carried in linen bags, each containing $60,000, and the airline shipped up to $1 million a week in this manner. The money was stored in a cement block strong room at Air France's cargo terminal at John F. Kennedy International Airport with round-the-clock private security guard. In 1967, Robert McMahon, an Air France employee, tipped off Burke, Hill, and DeSimone to an incoming delivery of between $400,000 and $700,000 in cash on Friday, April 7. McMahon said the best time for the actual robbery would be just before midnight when the security guard would be on his meal break. On the day of the robbery, Hill and DeSimone drove to Kennedy Airport with an empty suitcase, the largest Hill could find. At 11:40 p.m., they entered the Air France cargo terminal. McMahon suggested that they should just walk in, as people came to the terminal to pick up lost baggage. DeSimone and Hill entered the unsecured area unchallenged and unlocked the door with a duplicate key. Using a small flashlight, they found 7 of the bags, which they loaded into the suitcase and left. $420,000 was taken. No alarm was raised, no shots fired, and no one was injured. The theft was not discovered until the following Monday when a Wells Fargo truck arrived to pick up the cash to be delivered to the CNEP subsidiary, French American Banking Corporation. Now, just a quick note, $420,000 in 1967 would be equivalent to about $4 million today in 2025. His first murder. DeSimone committed what is believed to have been his first murder on March 15, 1968, at the age of 17. He was walking down the street with Hill when DeSimone spotted Howard Goldstein, a passing pedestrian, a random stranger unknown to either gangster. Hill recalls DeSimone turning to him and saying, "Hey, Henry, watch this." DeSimone yelled, "Hey, expletive," and pulled out a .38 caliber pistol and shot and killed Goldstein. Hill exclaimed, "That was cold-blooded, Tommy." DeSimone replied, "Well, I'm a mean cat." The murder of William Billy Bats Benvenna. In the book Wise Guy, Henry Hill said they threw a welcome home party in 1970 at Robert's Lounge, which was owned by Jimmy Burke, for William Billy Bats Benvenna, sometimes referred to as William Davino, a made man in Carmine Fatico's crew, the same crew John Gotti was a part of in the Gambino crime family. Benvenna had just been released from prison after serving a 6-year stretch for drug possession. Hill states in Wise Guy that Benvenna saw DeSimone and asked him if he still shined shoes, and DeSimone took this as an insult. Hill also said that Benvenna provoked DeSimone because he wanted to impress some mobsters from another crime family who were present. A couple of minutes later, when that issue seemed to be forgotten, DeSimone leaned over to Henry Hill and Jimmy Burke and said, "I'm going to kill that expletive." Hill saw that he was serious about it. A couple of weeks later, on June 11, 1970, Benvenna went over to The Suite, owned by Henry Hill in Jamaica, Queens, to go drinking with DeSimone's crew, including Hill, DeSimone, and Jimmy. Later that night, DeSimone took his girlfriend home and Burke started making Benvenna feel comfortable. 20 minutes later, DeSimone arrived with a .38 revolver and a plastic mattress cover. DeSimone walked over to him at the corner of the bar and attacked Benvenna. Before he was attacked, Jimmy Burke tightened his arms around Benvenna and he was pistol whipped with a .38 caliber revolver. He was so inebriated that he couldn't defend himself. In the book Wise Guy, Hill said that before DeSimone started to beat Benvenna, DeSimone yelled, "Shine these expletive shoes!" DeSimone killed Benvenna not only because he had insulted him, but also because Burke had taken over Benvenna's loan shark business while Billy Batts was in prison. According to Hill, Benvenna had been complaining to Joseph Gallo about getting back this racket. Not wanting to return the business to Benvenna, Burke knew sooner or later Benvenna would have to be killed. According to The Lufthansa Heist, a book written by Hill and journalist Daniel Simone, in Goodfellas, DeSimone kills Billy Batts, Benvenna, which they refer to in the book as Davino, over an insult about his past as a shoeshine boy. That part of the movie was fiction, Simone says. After the beating, the three men put Benvenna into the trunk of Hill's 1970 Buick Electra and went to DeSimone's mother's house to get a knife, lime, and a shovel. Now, why lime or quicklime? Mobsters use lime on dead bodies to speed up decay, mask the smell of decomposition, and potentially destroy or obscure evidence. Lime is a chemical compound that can accelerate the breakdown of organic matter, making it easier to hide a body. It also helps to reduce the smell of rotting flesh, which can be a clue for investigators. Additionally, lime can make it more difficult to identify a body, potentially destroying or obscuring evidence. Later in the drive, the men realized that Benvenna was still alive when he began beating on the car from inside the trunk. When they got closer to their destination, Hill said it had been an hour or so of DeSimone driving, and he kept getting mad about the noises in the trunk, and finally slammed the brakes on and leaned over for the shovel, and then Burke and DeSimone didn't actually shoot him. They just stabbed him 30 or 40 expletive times. It was expletive horrible. Hill doesn't mention a knife, but claims Burke and DeSimone finished Benvenna off by beating and stabbing him with a tire iron and a shovel. And the men later buried him under a dog kennel. At the time of the murder in 1970, Benvenna was 49 years old and was a respected and a feared made man in the Gambino crime family, as well as a personal friend of future Gambino boss, John Gotti. What does being a made man mean in the Mafia? Briefly, in the Mafia, or Cosa Nostra, to be made means becoming a fully initiated member of the organization, also referred to as a made man or man of honor. This status was achieved through a formal ritualistic ceremony, often involving oaths and blood, signifying loyalty and a commitment to the code of silence. Made men were the only ones who could rise through the Mafia hierarchy. Murdering a made man without the official consent of his family's leadership was an unforgivable offense in the Mafia code, especially by a rival family and a mere associate such as DeSimone. And it was this murder, after the Gotti crew definitively tied DeSimone to the killing, that led to DeSimone's own murder as retaliation. The murders of Janko, Sersani, and Jareth. DeSimone's third murder is described by Hill in the book Wise Guy and is also portrayed on film in Goodfellas. A young man named Michael Spider Janko was serving as a bartender at a card game, where he and DeSimone had an argument after Janko forgot about DeSimone's drink that resulted in DeSimone pulling out a handgun and demanding that Janko dance for him. DeSimone shot him in the foot when Janko refused. A week later, when Janko was again serving drinks, now on a full leg cast, DeSimone started to goad him about his wounded foot, spurring Janko to reply, "Why don't you go expletive yourself, Tommy?" After a stunned silence, a delighted and impressed Burke, having now a newly developed respect for Janko for sticking up for himself, gave Janko some money before jokingly teasing DeSimone, who hadn't said or done anything in retaliation, about going soft. DeSimone, in his usual way, took the teasing seriously and lost his temper, fatally shooting Janko 3 times in the chest, angrily demanding of Burke if that was good enough for him. Burke and Hill were furious with DeSimone's lack of control. Burke yelled, "All right, you dumb expletive. If you're going to be a big expletive wise guy, you dig the hole," and he made him bury Janko's body in the cellar by himself. Hill stated that after he saw this, he was truly convinced that DeSimone was a total psychopath. It is believed that Janko's body was subsequently moved because it was not found in that location. There is also speculation as to whether Spider even existed, as the police never found a birth certificate or family and friends, indicating that Hill possibly made the story up. But on the Howard Stern show, Hill said that Spider was buried next to Robert's Lounge, which was owned by Jimmy Burke, along with other bodies. There was a later interview with Spider's alleged sister on the Howard Stern show who wanted to know where the body was. DeSimone's next, or 4th murder, according to Hill, occurred when DeSimone and another associate named Stanley Diamond got carried away after being asked to rough up a witness to a robbery. After a truck heist, a foreman had refused to allow Burke to unload the cargo of his hijacked truck in his warehouse, and vehemently protested because they had no union cards. Burke attempted to reason with the man, who stood his ground and refused to be intimidated. Burke later sent DeSimone and Stanley Diamond to the man's house in the boondocks of New Jersey, with instructions to threaten and just rough him up, to ensure he would cooperate with Burke in the future. DeSimone and Stanley Diamond were so angry and so worked up about having to drive all the way to New Jersey, they ended up beating the man to death over essentially nothing. DeSimone's 5th murder occurred when Jimmy Burke ordered the murder of his best friend, Dominic Remo Cersani, who became an informant and was going to set Burke up in a cigarette hijack for Burke to get arrested. Burke got suspicious about Cersani and later found out from one of his friends in a Queens, New York DA's office that Cersani was talking to the NYPD and they were going to arrest Burke on a truck hijacking charge. DeSimone and Burke killed Remo that same week. The pair met Remo at Robert's Lounge and said to him, "Let's take a ride." DeSimone strangled Remo with a piano wire from the back seat of the car. Henry Hill said in Wise Guy that Remo put up some fight, man. He kicked and swung an expletive all over himself before he died. Burke had Remo's body buried next to the bocce court behind Robert's Lounge. It was said that whenever Burke and DeSimone played bocce ball with their friends, they would jokingly say, "Hey Remo, how you doing?" DeSimone next killed Gotti protege Ronald Foxy Jareth on December 18, 1974. DeSimone had dated Jareth's sister and had beaten her up, prompting Jareth to threaten to kill him. When DeSimone heard about the threat, he went to Jareth's apartment and knocked on the door. Jareth opened the door and punched DeSimone in the face. DeSimone then shot Jareth between the eyes. The Lufthansa heist. DeSimone was alleged to have taken part in the December 11, 1978 Lufthansa heist from JFK International Airport. The loot is reputed to have amounted to an estimated $5.875 million, equivalent to $28.3 million in 2025, which was stolen from the Lufthansa cargo terminal at Kennedy Airport, with $5 million in cash and $875,000 in jewelry, making it the largest cash robbery committed on U.S. soil at the time. DeSimone was spotted because he had very well-polished shoes, too well-polished for an airport employee. Burke decided on DeSimone, McMahon, Angelo Sepe, which was DeSimone's ex-cellmate, Louis Cafora, Joe Manry, and Paolo Lecastri as the robbers. Burke's son Frank would drive one of the backup vehicles while Parnell Stax Edwards, a musician and career criminal, was given the task of disposing of the getaway van afterwards. After the heist, Edwards was instructed to drive the vehicle to New Jersey, where it, along with any potential evidence inside, was to be destroyed in a junkyard belonging to Gotti. Instead, Edwards parked the van in front of a fire hydrant at his girlfriend's apartment, where police discovered it 2 days after the heist. The plates were stolen, and the police impounded the van. They soon found Stack's fingerprints and connected it to the robbery. Vario subsequently ordered DeSimone to kill Edwards. "Stax has got to go. He'll give up every one of us," Vario said. "Paulie, how can you ask me to whack Stax?" DeSimone pleaded. "I mean, him and me go back to before I can remember. I'm the only person on earth he trusts." Vario vowed that in return for killing Edwards, DeSimone would get his button. He would become a made man, an official member of the mob. "I promise you, I'll do whatever I can to make it happen," DeSimone said. Once he found out where Edwards was hiding, DeSimone and Sepe visited Edwards and shot him 6 times in the chest and head with a silenced pistol. Following the Lufthansa heist, Teresa Ferrara, Martin Krugman, Robert McMahon, Joe Manry, Parnell Edwards, and Paolo Lecastri had all been murdered by Burke, who wanted to avoid paying them their share of the loot. In Wise Guy, Hill mentioned that DeSimone had killed around 4 people in prison, bringing his possible body count to approximately 11. Hill commented that DeSimone would sometimes kill someone just because he wanted to try out a new firearm, and wouldn't hesitate to use someone as human target practice. Hill also stated that he and Jimmy Burke didn't really know how many people DeSimone had actually killed. Disappearance. It is believed that DeSimone was murdered as a reprisal for having killed 2 of John Gotti's close friends, specifically William Billy Bats Benvenna and Foxy Jareth. On January 14, 1979, DeSimone's wife, Angela, reported him missing. She said she had last seen Tommy a few weeks earlier when he borrowed $60 from her. When Hill became an FBI informant in 1980, he told authorities that DeSimone had been murdered by the Gambino crime family. Despite the oft-given date of death of January 14, 1979, the exact date of DeSimone's murder is uncertain. Henry claimed that in the week after Christmas, he and Jimmy Burke had gone down to Florida to straighten out a drug deal gone bad. Tommy had remained behind in New York because he was going to be made. When Jimmy called to see if the ceremony had occurred, the code phrase was to ask if Tommy had seen his godmother yet. Burke was told that it had been called off due to a heavy snowfall. The next day, Burke found out that DeSimone had been murdered. He slammed the phone down and began crying, just as depicted in the film Goodfellas. Henry also indicated in the book, both Wise Guy and the DVD commentary to Goodfellas, that DeSimone had been killed when Martin Krugman disappeared on January 6, 1979. In 1994, Henry Hill, in his book Gangsters and Goodfellas, gave an expanded story of the events leading up to DeSimone's death. Hill's wife, Karen, had been having an affair with Hill's boss, Mafia Capo Regime Paul Vario. When Hill was sentenced to prison, DeSimone approached Karen for sex. When she turned him down, DeSimone attempted to rape her. In retaliation for the attempted rape, Vario approached the Gambino crew and revealed that DeSimone had murdered Jareth and Benvenna without first seeking permission from the Gambino crime family, violating Mafia protocol. Sometime in late December 1978 or early January 1979, DeSimone was contacted and told that he was going to be made. Peter Vario, Paul Vario's son, and Bruno Facciolo took him to an unknown location where he was murdered. There are at least two theories as to who actually killed De Simone. According to mob informant Joseph Joe Dogs Iannuzzi, Thomas Agro claimed in 1985 that he was the driving force behind the murder. Agro also claimed to have murdered De Simone's brother Anthony after he turned informant. Agro also suggested murdering the eldest and last remaining De Simone brother, Robert. According to Iannuzzi, Agro would often laughingly refer to killing the third De Simone brother, stating, "Maybe it's time to go for the De Simone trifecta." Another account, told by Henry Hill in Gangsters and Goodfellas, states that John Gotti himself was the assassin. On May 17, 2007, on The Howard Stern Show, Hill reaffirmed that Gotti had killed De Simone. He also added that the death took a long time, as Billy Batts had been a personal friend of Gotti's, and he wanted De Simone to suffer before he died. De Simone was declared legally dead by the FBI in 1990, the same year Goodfellas was released. He was thought to have been buried at a suspected mafia graveyard on the Brooklyn-Queens border near John F. Kennedy International Airport, where the body of Al Indelicato was found in 1981, and the bodies of Philip Giacone and Dominic Trinchera were recovered by police in 2004. De Simone's presence in popular culture. De Simone's infamy rests on his depiction by actor Joe Pesci in the 1990 movie Goodfellas, renamed Tommy DeVito in the film, a role for which Pesci won the 1990 Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. The movie took some artistic liberties. Primarily, De Simone was 6 years younger than Hill in real life, not the same age, as implied when they first met. While depicted in the film as a small man with an attitude, De Simone was a large, burly enforcer, standing at 6 foot 2 inches tall and around 225 pounds. Although based on De Simone, Tommy DeVito also functions as a composite character. The DeVito character is substituted for various individuals not portrayed in the film. For example, in the double date scene where Hill meets his future wife, Tommy DeVito is substituted for Paul Vario's son, Paul Jr., who actually went on the date. Hill nevertheless calls Pesci's portrayal between 90 and 95% accurate, mentioning only that the diminutive Pesci did not physically resemble the tall, muscular De Simone. Pesci was 46 years old during production of Goodfellas, while De Simone was only in his teens and 20s during the real-life events depicted in the film, and is believed to have been murdered at age 28. Also, in real life, Vario allowed the Gambinos to kill De Simone in retaliation for the murder of Batts and Foxy Jareth, whereas in the film, elder members of the family solely execute Tommy DeVito for killing a made man without permission, shooting him both in the front and back of the head. Hill's narration makes a reference to the true events, saying DeVito was murdered as revenge for Billy Batts, and a lot of other things. In the film, DeVito is shot and killed by Tootie, based on Paul Vario's younger brother Vito, and by Vinny, played by Charles Scorsese, based on Thomas Agro. Unlike his real-life counterpart, DeVito's body is found shortly afterwards and is given a funeral, though he is shot in the face specifically so that he cannot be given an open casket funeral. And so goes the story of Thomas Two-Gun Tommy De Simone, a short life filled with violent rage, unrestrained aggression, and animalistic appetites. In the end, he went out the same way he lived, with homicidal violence. All right, folks, that's going to do this episode of the MOA Broadcast True Crime Series today. Thank you for joining us for the True Crime edition of the MOA Broadcast. Remember, we have the regular MOA broadcast that goes out over the radio on Saturday and Sunday, over the airwaves in Southern Oregon, and then gets uploaded as a podcast. You can find more information at www.gearconvoy.com under the tab MOA Broadcast. And there's also info on how to support our Patreon page and get the video version of the broadcast also. If you have any feedback or questions, feel free to email us at info@gearconvoy.com. And we're going to wrap it up there. Thanks for joining us, folks. Remember, don't wait until you have an emergency to prepare for it. If you wait, it may be too late. If you don't make it out alive, you don't make it out at all. Stay safe out there, folks.